The dusty streets of Redemption, Arizona Territory shimmered in the brutal August heat of 1878 as a crowd gathered around the makeshift auction platform. Sophia Dawson stood with her wrists bound, her once fine dress now travel-worn, her auburn hair falling in untamed waves down her back. Despite the humiliation, her emerald eyes blazed with defiance as the auctioneer rattled off invented transgressions to the restless crowd. "Gentlemen, what am I bid for this fine woman? Accused of theft and vagrancy, sentenced to indentured servitude to pay her debts. Who'll start the bidding at $50? The auctioneer's voice boomed across the town square. Sophia stood rigid, refusing to show fear. 3 weeks ago, she'd been the respected daughter of a Boston merchant. Now, after her father's sudden death and the discovery that his business partner had embezzled everything, she'd traveled west with hopes of reaching her distant cousin in California. Instead, she'd been drugged at a stagecoach stop, robbed of her remaining money and papers, then falsely accused of theft when she couldn't pay for her lodgings. The crowd of rough-looking men eyed her hungrily, some calling out crude comments that made her stomach turn. The territorial judge had been quick to sentence her to 5 years of indentured servitude, a thinly veiled form of slavery that still persisted in these remote parts where federal law was often ignored. "I have 50 from Mr. Thornton. Do I hear 60? The auctioneer pointed to a corpulent man with yellowed teeth who leered at Sophia. 75, called another man, thin and wiry with cruel eyes. 100, drawled a gray-haired rancher whose reputation for working servants to death was well known even to Sophia, who'd only been in town 3 days, most of those spent in the squalid jail. The bidding climbed higher, each sum making Sophia's heart sink further. She knew what awaited her: years of abuse and servitude from which she might never escape. 200, shouted a voice from the back. 250, countered the gray-haired rancher. The crowd parted as the thunder of hoofbeats approached. A tall figure on horseback rode directly toward the auction platform, the massive black stallion snorting as it came to a halt mere feet from the steps. The rider was broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, leather vest dusty from the trail. $500, the stranger said, his voice low but carrying across the suddenly silent square. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. 500 from the gentleman on horseback. Do I hear, and she stays with me? The stranger continued, dismounting in one fluid motion. He stepped forward, and Sophia saw his face clearly for the first time, weather-beaten but handsome, with piercing blue eyes and a strong jaw darkened by several days' worth of stubble. This auction is illegal under federal law. Indenture for debt was outlawed years ago. This here's territorial business, stranger, the auctioneer sputtered. Judge Carlton himself authorized this auction. The man ascended the steps of the platform, moving with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to danger. The name's Zachary Zimmerman, U.S. Marshal. He pulled back his vest to reveal a silver badge. And I'm ending this right now. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some men drifted away immediately, not wanting trouble with federal law. Others, including the disappointed bidders, lingered with hostile glares. Marshal or not, she's been sentenced fair and square, the gray-haired rancher protested. I already had my bid in. Your bid's no good, Harmon, Zachary replied coolly. And if Judge Carlton has been sentencing people to indenture, he'll be answering to a federal judge soon enough. He turned to Sophia, and she was startled by the gentleness in his eyes compared to the steel in his voice when he'd addressed the crowd. Madam, I'll be escorting you away from here. You're under my protection now. Without waiting for her response, he pulled a knife from his belt and cut the ropes binding her wrists. Sophia rubbed the raw skin, uncertain whether to trust this unexpected savior, but knowing she had no better options. Marshal, the auctioneer began nervously, there are procedures. The procedure is that you all disperse immediately, Zachary interrupted, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. Something in his tone made the remaining men shuffle their feet and look away. Even the most belligerent among them seemed unwilling to challenge him directly. Zachary guided Sophia down the steps with a light touch on her elbow. Can you ride? He asked quietly. Yes, she answered, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. With a slight pressure of his knees, the stallion moved forward, walking unhurriedly through the dispersing crowd. "Where are you taking me?" Sophia asked once they'd left the town square. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "I have a homestead about 3 hours' ride from here. We'll talk more once we're clear of town." As they rode past the last buildings of Redemption, Sophia felt the eyes of townspeople watching from windows and doorways. She sat stiffly in front of the marshal, trying to maintain some distance despite the intimacy forced by sharing a saddle. "You can relax," Zachary said after they'd ridden in silence for several minutes. "No one's following us." "Why did you help me?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. In her experience, men didn't offer assistance without expecting something in return. "Because what they were doing was wrong," he answered simply. Then, after a pause, "and because I recognized you weren't from around here. Figured you might have fallen on hard times." "I'm not a criminal," she said firmly. "Never thought you were." The trail narrowed, forcing the horse to navigate around rocky outcroppings. "What's your name?" "Sophia. Sophia Dawson." "Well, Miss Dawson, I imagine you've got quite a story to tell." As they rode, the landscape changed from arid flatlands to more varied terrain with scrubby juniper trees and occasional stands of pine. The air grew marginally cooler as they gained elevation, offering slight relief from the oppressive heat. Sophia found herself gradually relaxing against the marshal's solid presence. Despite her wariness, exhaustion was taking its toll. She hadn't slept properly in days, constantly alert for danger in the town jail. "You can rest if you need to," Zachary said, seeming to sense her fatigue. "I won't let you fall." Pride made her want to refuse, but practicality won out. She allowed herself to lean back slightly, taking some of the strain off her aching muscles. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what it's worth," he said after a long silence. "I'm sorry for what happened to you in Redemption. It's a rough town. Some places out here, the law is whatever the strongest men say it is." "And you're stronger than they are?" she asked. She felt rather than saw his smile. "Let's just say I know when to pick my fights." And that was one worth picking. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the warmth of the sun eventually lulled Sophia into a light doze. She startled awake when the horse stopped to drink from a small stream. "We're about halfway there," Zachary said, dismounting and offering his hand to help her down. "Thought we could use a short break." Sophia's legs trembled as her feet touched the ground, stiff from the unaccustomed riding. She walked awkwardly to the stream's edge, splashing cool water on her face and taking grateful sips from cupped hands. Zachary filled a canteen, then offered it to her. "Easier to drink from this." "Thank you." She accepted it, watching him warily over the rim as she drank. He busied himself checking the horse's saddle, giving her space. "Must have been quite a shock," he said eventually, "going from whatever life you had before to nearly being auctioned off." Sophia hesitated, then decided there was little point in concealment. "I was traveling to California to stay with my cousin. My father died, and I discovered his business partner had stolen everything. I had enough money for the journey, but someone drugged my tea at a stagecoach stop. When I woke, my money and papers were gone." Zachary's expression darkened. "That happens too often. Travelers are easy targets. The hotel owner accused me of trying to stay without paying. The sheriff arrested me. The judge barely listened before sentencing me." She handed back the canteen, her voice bitter. 3 days later, I was on that auction block. "Judge Carlton has been lining his pockets for years," Zachary said. "He and Sheriff Biggs work together, along with a few other prominent citizens. They target vulnerable travelers, especially women without male companions. And no one stops them. The territory's vast. Federal marshals can't be everywhere." He secured the canteen to the saddle. "I've been building a case against them for months. Your situation might help bring them down, if you're willing to testify." Sophia stared at him. "Is that why you intervened? To use me as a witness?" "No," he replied firmly. "I intervened because it was the right thing to do. The possibility of testimony is secondary." Something in his direct gaze convinced her he was telling the truth. "I'll testify," she said. "Gladly. That's brave of you." He offered his hand again. "We should keep moving." As they continued their journey, Sophia gradually told him more of her story, her comfortable upbringing in Boston, her education, her father's sudden illness and death, and the shocking discovery that his business partner had been embezzling funds for years, leaving her virtually penniless. "My cousin Charlotte is my only remaining family," she explained. "She married a man who found success in the gold rush and settled near Sacramento. I wrote to her after father's death, and she immediately invited me to stay with them." "Sacramento's still a long way from here," Zachary observed. "Yes," Sophia agreed, the weight of that reality settling on her shoulders. "And now I have no money to continue the journey." "One problem at a time," he said pragmatically. "First, we get you somewhere safe. Then we figure out the rest." The landscape grew more beautiful as they rode, with dramatic rock formations and distant blue mountains. Eventually, they crested a ridge, and Zachary pointed to a valley below where a modest homestead nestled beside a small creek, surrounded by pine trees. "There it is," he said. "Not much to look at, but it's peaceful." The homestead consisted of a well-built log cabin with a stone chimney, a small barn, a corral, and a fenced garden plot. Smoke curled from the chimney, surprising Sophia. "Someone's there," she said, tension returning to her voice. "My ranch hand, Elijah. He helps manage the place when I'm away on Marshal business. He's trustworthy." As they approached, a lean, gray-haired man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. He raised a hand in greeting, then disappeared back inside, emerging moments later to take the reins as they reached the yard. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon, Marshal," Elijah said, his curious gaze flickering to Sophia. "Change of plans," Zachary replied, dismounting before helping Sophia down. "This is Miss Sophia Dawson. She'll be staying with us for a while. Miss Dawson, this is Elijah Moore, the finest horseman and cook in the territory." Elijah tipped his hat. "Madam, pleasure to meet you." "Thank you," Sophia replied, uncertain how to interact in this unfamiliar situation. "Elijah, could you see to thunder? Miss Dawson and I have had a long ride from Redemption. Course. Stews on the stove, biscuits in the oven." Elijah led the horse toward the barn, tactfully giving them privacy. Zachary guided Sophia toward the cabin. "You can wash up and rest. We can talk more after you've had a chance to recover from the journey." The cabin's interior was surprisingly comfortable, clean, and well-ordered, with simple but sturdy furniture. A central room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace and a wooden table. 2 doors led off to what Sophia presumed were bedrooms. "The room on the right will be yours," Zachary said, gesturing. "It's small, but it's private. The washroom is out back. We pump water from the well. I'll have Elijah heat some for you." Sophia stood awkwardly in the center of the room, overwhelmed by the sudden transition from prisoner to guest. "Marshal Zimmerman, Zach," he corrected. "Out here, we don't stand on formality." "Zach," she said hesitantly, "I'm grateful for your help, but I don't understand why you're doing all this. Surely there was somewhere in town you could have taken me, some official place for people in my situation." He sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "Miss Dawson, Sophia," she interrupted, managing a small smile. "Sophia," he acknowledged with a nod. "The truth is, you wouldn't be safe anywhere in Redemption. Carlton and Biggs have too much influence, and the nearest federal outpost is 4 days' ride from here. This was the safest option. And you trust me enough to bring me into your home? You know nothing about me." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'm a fair judge of character. Had to be, to survive this long as a marshal. You strike me as someone who's had a run of bad luck, not someone looking to cause trouble." Before she could respond, the door opened and Elijah entered with a steaming bucket. "Water for the lady," he announced. "I'll set up the tub out back." "Thank you, Elijah," Zachary said. "And maybe you could show Miss Dawson where everything is while I tend to a few things." "Be my pleasure." The older man smiled kindly at Sophia. "Come along, miss. You look like you could use a good wash and a hot meal, in that order." The bath, though primitive by Boston standards, felt like heaven to Sophia. Behind a canvas screen set up for privacy, she scrubbed away days of grime and jail dust, washing her hair with the lavender-scented soap Elijah had provided. The clean clothes he'd found for her obviously belonging to a woman, though Zachary hadn't mentioned any female presence, were simple but well-made. A calico dress that hung a bit loose on her frame and clean undergarments. Those belonged to the Marshal's sister, Elijah explained when she emerged, her damp hair braided down her back. She visits sometimes and keeps a few things here. About your size, I reckon. Please thank her for me when she next visits, Sophia said, feeling more human than she had in weeks. Might be a while, Elijah said, stirring the bubbling stew. She lives back east now. Married a railroad man. The marshal keeps her room ready, though. Understanding dawned. That's the room I'm staying in. Elijah nodded. Marshal figured you'd be more comfortable there. It's all fixed up nice and proper for a lady. Zachary returned as they were sitting down to dinner. He'd changed into a clean shirt and washed away the trail dust, revealing a handsome face that looked younger without the grime of travel. The stew was delicious, tender venison with vegetables from the garden, and the conversation surprisingly easy. Elijah regaled her with tales of the area, carefully avoiding any questions about her situation, for which Sophia was grateful. After dinner, Elijah excused himself to check on the horses, leaving Sophia alone with Zachary for the first time since their arrival. How are you feeling? He asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. Better, she admitted. Though still. Adrift, I suppose. He nodded. That's understandable. You've been through a lot. What happens now? She asked, cradling the warm cup between her hands. You rest. Recover your strength. In a week or so, I need to travel to Prescott to report to the federal judge there. You could come with me, tell your story. After that, he shrugged. We'll figure out how to get you to California. I have no way to repay you, she said quietly. I'm not looking for repayment. His voice was gentle but firm. Consider it justice for what almost happened to you. Before she could respond, Elijah burst through the door, his expression urgent. Riders coming. 6 of them, moving fast. Zachary was on his feet instantly, reaching for his gun belt. Get Miss Dawson to the root cellar. Then come back with the rifles. What's happening? Sophia asked, fear clutching at her throat. Probably nothing good, Zachary replied grimly. Elijah, go. The older man took Sophia's arm, leading her quickly through the kitchen to a trapdoor concealed under a rug. Down you go, miss. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. The root cellar was cool and earthy smelling, lined with shelves of preserved foods. Sophia huddled in the darkest corner, straining to hear what was happening above. The thud of boots, the murmur of voices, then Zachary's voice, clear and commanding. That's far enough, Sheriff. You're trespassing on private property. Now, Marshal, no need for hostilities, replied a voice Sophia recognized with a shudder. Sheriff Biggs from Redemption. We've come for the woman. She's a convicted criminal, escaped custody. She's under federal protection as a witness, Zachary countered. Any claims Redemption has on her are superseded. That's so? Funny, I don't recall any federal intervention being properly filed. Seems to me you just rode in and stole town property. She's a human being, not property, Zachary said, his voice dangerous. And I've got a badge that says I don't need your permission to enforce federal law. There was a tense silence. Then Sheriff Biggs spoke again, his voice dropping to a menacing drawl. You know, Marshal, accidents happen out here all the time. Men could get shot by outlaws. Or maybe Indians. No one would question it much. Is that a threat, Sheriff? Just an observation about frontier life. Hand over the woman, and we'll be on our way. Refuse, and, well, 6 against 2 aren't odds I'd take. I count different odds, Zachary replied. I see 6 men about to make the worst mistake of their lives. Another voice joined in Elijah's, steady and measured. First man draws gets a chest full of buckshot. I'm old, but my aim's still true. Sophia pressed her hands to her mouth, heart pounding so loudly she was certain they must hear it above. The tension stretched unbearably until Sheriff Biggs spoke again. Seems we're at an impasse. Seems we are, Zachary agreed. So here's what's going to happen. You and your men are going to turn around and ride back to Redemption. I'm taking Miss Dawson to Prescott to testify before Judge Hollister about the illegal indenture scheme you and Carlton have been running. After that, federal agents will be paying Redemption a visit. You're bluffing, Biggs said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? I've been building a case for months. Got statements from 3 victims already. Miss Dawson makes 4. Judge Hollister has been very interested in my reports. The silence that followed was different, calculating rather than threatening. Marshal, Biggs said finally, perhaps we could come to an arrangement. The only arrangement on offer is you leave now. and maybe I put in a word about your cooperation when the federal prosecutors come calling. The shuffling of feet, the creak of saddle leather. This isn't over, Zimmerman. For your sake, I hope it is, Zachary replied. Because if I see you or your men within 10 miles of my property again, I won't be so hospitable. The thunder of hoofbeats gradually faded into the distance. Sophia remained frozen in place, unsure whether it was safe to move. The trapdoor opened, flooding the cellar with lamplight. Zachary's face appeared, concern evident in his features. You can come up now. They've gone. He helped her climb out, his strong hands steady around her waist. Her legs trembled so badly she nearly collapsed when she reached the kitchen. Easy, he murmured, guiding her to a chair. You're safe. Elijah appeared with a glass of amber liquid. Whiskey. Just a sip, miss. Helps with the nerves. Sophia normally didn't drink spirits, but she accepted the glass, taking a small swallow that burned down her throat and spread warmth through her chest. Will they come back? She asked, looking between the two men. Not tonight, Zachary said, checking the loading of his revolver before returning it to its holster. Biggs is a coward at heart. He won't risk a direct confrontation unless he has overwhelming odds. But eventually, Zachary and Elijah exchanged glances. We should leave for Prescott sooner rather than later, Zachary said. Maybe tomorrow. So soon? Elijah asked. The ladies hardly had time to rest. Better tired than dead, Zachary replied bluntly. Biggs will be back with more men. We need to be gone before then. The reality of her situation washed over Sophia with crushing force. This is all because of me. I've put you both in danger. No, Zachary said firmly, kneeling beside her chair to meet her eyes. This is because of corrupt men abusing their power. You're a victim, not the cause. But no buts. His hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. We'll leave at first light. Prescott is 3 days hard ride. Once we're there, you'll be under Judge Hollister's protection while you give your testimony. Sophia nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. The events of the day had drained what little energy she'd recovered. You should get some sleep, Zachary said gently. Tomorrow will be challenging. I'll take first watch, Elijah said, lifting a rifle from its place above the fireplace. You get some rest too, Marshal. I'll wake you in 4 hours. Sophia allowed Zachary to escort her to the small bedroom. Despite her exhaustion, she paused at the doorway. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. Something flickered in his blue eyes' warmth, perhaps, or something deeper that she couldn't quite name. Sleep well, Sophia. I promise you're safe tonight. After he left, she sank onto the narrow bed, certain that sleep would elude her despite her exhaustion. To her surprise, she drifted off almost immediately, lulled by the knowledge that Zachary and Elijah stood guard against the dangers of the night. Dawn arrived with a gentle knock at her door. Miss Dawson? It's time, Elijah called softly. Sophia dressed quickly in the clothes laid out for her, sturdy riding clothes that must have belonged to Zachary's sister, along with a wide-brimmed hat to protect against the sun. When she emerged, she found the men had been busy. Saddlebags were packed, horses readied, and a simple breakfast of coffee, bacon, and biscuits waited on the table. Eat quickly, Zachary advised. We need to be on the trail within the hour. As she ate, he explained their route. We'll head northwest through the mountains rather than taking the main trail. It's rougher terrain, but less likely to be watched. We'll stop at a friend's trading post the first night, camp the second, and reach Prescott by sundown on the third day if all goes well. Your friend can be trusted? Sophia asked. With my life, Zachary confirmed. Samuel Running Deer was my scout when I first came to the territory. He married a white woman and runs a trading post that serves both settlers and the local tribes. We'll be safe there. Within the hour, they were mounted and ready. Zachary had provided Sophia with a gentle mare named Daisy, steady on mountain trails. Elijah would remain behind to watch the homestead and, as he put it, give any unwelcome visitors a proper greeting. Be careful, both of you, the older man said as they prepared to leave. And Marshal, remember what I said about being too much alone. Zachary's only response was a nod before he turned his horse toward the trail. Sophia followed, wondering at the cryptic exchange, but too preoccupied with the journey ahead to dwell on it. The trail quickly became challenging, winding through rocky passes and steep inclines. Zachary set a pace that was brisk but not punishing, mindful of Sophia's limited riding experience. They spoke little, conserving energy and staying alert for any signs of pursuit. By midday, they stopped in a sheltered grove beside a small spring to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch of jerky and hard biscuits. "How are you holding up?" Zachary asked, studying her with concern. Sophia stretched her aching muscles, determined not to complain. "Well enough. It's beautiful country, despite the circumstances." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "It is. I fell in love with this territory the first time I rode through it. Never wanted to leave." "How long have you been a marshal?" 8 years. Before that, I fought in the war, then drifted west like many others. Took the badge because I saw too much injustice going unpunished." She studied him, sensing there was more to his story. "In your homestead? It seems an isolated life for a man dedicated to justice." A shadow crossed his features. "Everyone needs a sanctuary, a place apart from the world's troubles." Before she could ask more, he stood, scanning the horizon. "We should move on. I want to reach higher ground before sunset." They continued their journey, the trail growing steeper as they ascended into pine-covered mountains. Zachary frequently checked their back trail, though he assured Sophia he'd seen no signs of pursuit. Late afternoon brought them to a ridgeline with a spectacular view of the valleys below and mountains beyond. Zachary reined in, allowing Sophia to catch up and appreciate the panorama. "It's breathtaking," she said, momentarily forgetting their circumstances. "Worth every hardship, isn't it?" He replied, something in his voice making her turn to study him. In that moment, with the golden light of approaching sunset illuminating his face, Sophia saw past the marshal's stern exterior to the man beneath, a man of deep feeling and conviction, whose eyes reflected the same wonder she felt at the landscape's beauty. Something shifted in her perception of him, a recognition that made her heart beat faster. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, too far from the trading post to reach before dark. Zachary efficiently set up a small tent for Sophia, built a fire that produced minimal smoke, and prepared a simple but satisfying meal of beans, salt pork, and coffee. As they sat beside the fire, the night closing around them with a blanket of stars unlike any Sophia had seen in Boston, she found herself opening up to him about her hopes and fears. "I've always lived in cities," she confessed, "always surrounded by people and buildings and noise. Out here, with so much space and silence, I feel both terrified and free somehow." Zachary nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The territory does that to people. Strips away pretensions, forces you to confront who you really are." "And who am I?" she asked softly, half to herself. "Someone stronger than she knows," he replied, his gaze steady across the flickering flames. "You could have broken down after what happened in Redemption. Many would have. Instead, you're riding mountain trails and preparing to testify against powerful men." His words warmed her more than the fire. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "not just of Biggs and his men, but of what comes after. I have no money, no home, nowhere to go except to impose on a cousin I haven't seen since childhood." "Fear's natural," he said. "Courage isn't about not feeling fear, it's about acting despite it." He hesitated, then added, "And as for what comes after, there are always options. The territory needs educated women like you. Schools, businesses, ranches, they'd value someone with your background." "Are you suggesting I stay in Arizona territory?" she asked, surprised. "Just pointing out possibilities," he said, suddenly intent on adding wood to the fire. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch." Sophia retreated to her tent, her mind full of confusing thoughts. The idea of staying in this wild country had never occurred to her. Her sole focus had been reaching California and the safety of her cousin's home. Yet something about Zachary's suggestion resonated, planting a seed of possibility she couldn't quite dismiss. The next day's journey took them deeper into the mountains, along trails so faint Sophia often couldn't see them, though Zachary navigated with unwavering confidence. By late afternoon, they descended into a valley where a cluster of buildings marked Samuel Running Deer's trading post. The post consisted of a main store, a stable, several outbuildings, and a comfortable-looking house. As they approached, a tall man with copper skin and graying black hair stepped onto the porch, raising a hand in greeting. Zachary Zimmerman, he called. It has been too many moons. Samuel, Zachary replied warmly, dismounting and clasping the man's hand. Good to see you, old friend. Samuel's dark eyes turned to Sophia with frank curiosity. And who is this you bring to my home? Miss Sophia Dawson, Zachary said, helping her dismount. She's under my protection, traveling to Prescott to give testimony. Understanding dawned in Samuel's expression. More of your justice work. Come inside, both of you. Rebecca will be pleased to have another woman to talk with. Rebecca Running Deer proved to be a cheerful, plump woman in her 40s, who welcomed Sophia with motherly concern, clucking over her travel-worn appearance and immediately offering a bath and clean clothes. You poor dear, she said, leading Sophia to a private room at the back of the house. Traveling these trails is hard enough with preparation. You look like you've been through the wars. While Sophia bathed and changed into a borrowed dress, she could hear the murmur of male voices. Zachary explaining their situation to Samuel, she presumed. By the time she rejoined them, Rebecca was serving a hearty dinner of venison stew, cornbread, and wild greens. Samuel says you're testifying against Judge Carlton and Sheriff Biggs, Rebecca said as they ate. Brave of you. Those men have ruined many lives. You know of them? Sophia asked. Rebecca and Samuel exchanged glances. My niece, Rebecca said softly. She was traveling to join us 3 years ago. Stopped in Redemption. We never saw her again. They sold her to a mine owner in Nevada. Samuel continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. By the time we learned what happened, the trail was cold. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. That's monstrous. It is, Zachary agreed grimly. And all too common. Carlton and Biggs have been operating their scheme for years. Young women traveling alone are particular targets. I've been gathering stories, Samuel said. Names, dates, witnesses when possible. I've given everything to Zachary for his case. Your testimony could be the final piece we need, Zachary told Sophia. Judge Hollister has been looking for a way to move against Carlton for years, but the territorial politics are complicated. After dinner, Samuel spread a map on the table, and he and Zachary discussed their route to Prescott. Rebecca drew Sophia aside to the kitchen, ostensibly to help with dishes. He cares for you, the older woman said once they were alone. Who? Marshal Zimmerman. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. We barely know each other. Rebecca smiled knowingly. I've known Zachary for 12 years. He doesn't risk himself for just anyone. And he certainly doesn't look at just anyone the way he looks at you when you're not watching. You're mistaken, Sophia protested, though her heart beat faster at the suggestion. He's simply doing his duty. If you say so, Rebecca replied, unconvinced. But a woman knows these things. And a man like Zachary, he's been alone too long. Carries too many burdens by himself. Before Sophia could respond, the men rejoined them, and the conversation turned to more general topics. Samuel entertained them with stories of the territory's early days, and Rebecca shared gossip about settlers and native peoples alike. Despite the warmth and safety of the Running Deer's home, tension returned when Zachary announced they would leave before dawn. Better to be on our way early, he explained. We still have a hard day's ride ahead. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in days, Sophia found herself thinking of Rebecca's words. Did Zachary truly look at her differently when she wasn't aware? And more disturbing, why did the thought bring such a flutter of anticipation to her stomach? He was handsome, certainly strong and capable, with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. And he'd risked himself to save her, a stranger. But surely that was simply his character, his commitment to justice. Yet she couldn't deny the awareness that had grown between them on the trail, moments when their eyes met and held for just a heartbeat too long, or when his hand steadied her and lingered just a moment after it was necessary. She drifted into sleep with these thoughts swirling in her mind, only to be awakened what seemed like minutes later by a soft knock at her door. Miss Dawson? Zachary's voice, low and urgent. It's time. The pre-dawn darkness was absolute as they bid farewell to the Running Deers and mounted their horses. Rebecca pressed a bundle of food into Sophia's hands, and Samuel spoke quietly to Zachary, their faces grave in the lantern light. They rode in silence until the first gray light of dawn, Zachary setting a faster pace than before. Something in his manner alerted Sophia that all was not well. "What did Samuel tell you?" she asked when they paused briefly to water the horses at a small creek. Zachary hesitated, then sighed. "Riders passed through yesterday, asking questions. Not Biggs's men strangers, but armed and interested in a marshal traveling with a woman." Fear clutched at Sophia's throat. "They're still looking for us." "It appears so." His expression was grim. "Which means we need to reach Prescott as quickly as possible. Judge Hollister has marshals at his disposal. You'll be safer there." They pushed hard throughout the day, stopping only when necessary for the horses' sake. The terrain gradually changed, descending from mountains to rolling hills covered with scrub and occasional stands of pine. By late afternoon, they caught their first glimpse of Prescott in the distance, a substantial town nestled in a valley, its buildings stark against the landscape. "We'll be there within 2 hours, Zachary said, relief evident in his voice. The relief was short-lived. As they rounded a bend in the trail, 4 riders appeared ahead, blocking their path. Zachary reacted instantly, wheeling his horse around only to find 2 more riders emerging from the trees behind them. "Keep behind me," he ordered Sophia, his hand moving to his revolver. The leader of the group, a lean man with a pockmarked face, urged his horse forward. "Marshal Zimmerman," he called. "We've been looking for you." "Who's asking?" Zachary replied, his voice deceptively casual, though Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders. "Name's Tucker. I represent certain interests in redemption that are mighty concerned about your activities." Tucker's gaze shifted to Sophia, "Particularly your interference with local judicial matters. Federal law supersedes territorial justice," Zachary said evenly. "Miss Dawson is under my protection as a witness to criminal activity." Tucker smiled unpleasantly. "That's a matter of interpretation, ain't it? Judge Carlton has a different view. He's authorized us to bring the lady back to face proper sentencing. And if I refuse, then things get unpleasant." Tucker's hand hovered near his holster. 6 against 1, Marshal. Bad odds, even for a man with your reputation. Sophia's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Zachary seemed impossibly calm, though she sensed his mind racing through options. "Miss Dawson," he said without turning, "when I give the word, I want you to ride for Prescott as hard as you can. Don't stop for anything." "I can't leave you," she whispered, horrified. "You can and you will," he replied firmly. "Judge Hollister's office is on Montezuma Street. Tell him everything." Before she could protest further, Zachary's hand moved with blinding speed, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. Tucker's hat flew off as the bullet grazed his scalp, and chaos erupted. "Now!" Zachary shouted, wheeling his horse and firing again as Sophia spurred Daisy toward a gap between the rear riders. Gunshots exploded around her as she galloped past, too terrified to look back. A bullet whizzed past her ear, and another struck a tree trunk inches from her head. Then she was through, Daisy's hooves pounding the trail as they raced toward Prescott. Behind her, the gunfire continued, then faded as distance grew between them. Tears streamed down her face as she rode, torn between relief at her escape and agonizing fear for Zachary's fate. The thought that he might die protecting her was unbearable. Daisy, sensing her rider's distress and the urgency of their flight, ran as she had never run before. The distance to Prescott seemed both endless and too short for reaching the town meant safety for Sophia, but possibly abandoning Zachary to his fate. As the outskirts of town appeared, Sophia made a desperate decision. She couldn't simply ride to the judge's office while Zachary might be fighting for his life. She needed help, armed men who could return with her to the ambush site. The first building she encountered was a saloon. Without hesitation, she reined in and dismounted, nearly falling as her trembling legs hit the ground. She burst through the doors, causing conversations to halt mid-sentence as every head turned toward her. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking. "I need help. Marshal Zimmerman is under attack on the North Trail. 6 armed men. Please, someone help him." For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then a tall man with a sheriff's badge rose from a corner table. "Marshal Zimmerman, you say?" "Zachary Zimmerman." "Yes," Sophia confirmed, hope rising. "We were ambushed about 2 hours' ride from town. He stayed behind so I could escape." The sheriff turned to the room at large. "You all heard the lady. Zachary Zimmerman's one of our own. Who's riding with me? To Sophia's immense relief, nearly every man in the saloon stood. Within minutes, a posse of 15 armed men was mounting up outside, the sheriff issuing rapid orders. "Madam," he said to Sophia, "I'm Sheriff Parker. We'll find the marshal. Meanwhile, Deputy Collins here will escort you to Judge Hollister's residence. The judge will want to hear your story immediately." "I should go with you," Sophia protested. "I can show you where, with all due respect." "Madam, you've done your part," Sheriff Parker interrupted gently. "Let us do ours. Zachary would want you safe with the judge." Recognizing the wisdom in his words, Sophia reluctantly allowed the young deputy to escort her through town to an imposing house on Montezuma Street. Judge Hollister proved to be an elderly but sharp-eyed man who listened intently to her hurried explanation. "Carlton and Biggs," he muttered when she finished. "I've suspected their operations for years, but witnesses have a way of disappearing before they reach me. Please," Sophia begged. "Marshal Zimmerman risked everything to bring me here. He needs help. Sheriff Parker is the best man for the job," the judge assured her. "If Zachary can be helped, Parker will do it." He rang a bell, summoning a housekeeper. "Mrs. Miller, please show Miss Dawson to the guest room. She's had a trying journey." Despite her exhaustion, Sophia found sleep impossible. She paced the comfortable guest room, starting at every sound from outside, praying for news of Zachary. As darkness fell, her anxiety grew unbearable. Finally, near midnight, she heard the commotion of horses and men arriving. She rushed to the window, straining to see in the darkness. Moments later, a knock came at her door. Judge Hollister himself, his expression grave. "They've returned," he said. "Marshal Zimmerman is alive, but wounded. They're taking him to Dr. Simmons now." "How badly is he hurt?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Gunshot to the shoulder, another that grazed his side. Lost blood, but the sheriff thinks he'll recover." The judge hesitated. "He was conscious enough to ask about you. Seemed more concerned with your safety than his own injuries." Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. "May I see him?" "Tomorrow," the judge said firmly. "He needs immediate medical attention, and you need rest. I promise you'll be taken to him first thing in the morning." True to his word, Judge Hollister escorted Sophia to the doctor's house the following morning. Dr. Simmons, a brisk woman in her 50s, led them to a small, clean room where Zachary lay sleeping, his shoulder and torso bandaged, his face pale but peaceful. "He lost considerable blood," Dr. Simmons explained quietly. "Took the bullet out of his shoulder last night. The side wound was shallow, more messy than dangerous. He'll need time to recover his strength, but he's young and strong. Should heal completely with proper care." "May I stay with him?" Sophia asked, unable to take her eyes from Zachary's face. The doctor and judge exchanged glances. For a while, Dr. Simmons conceded. "But he needs rest more than company." Once they left, Sophia sat beside the bed, gently taking Zachary's hand in hers. His fingers were warm, his pulse steady under her touch. Relief washed over her in waves, bringing fresh tears to her eyes. "You foolish, brave man," she whispered. "Did you think I could simply ride away and leave you to die?" To her surprise, his fingers tightened around hers. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing those blue eyes, clouded with pain but still alert. "You were supposed to," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "That was the plan." "A terrible plan," she replied, a watery smile breaking through her tears. "Fortunately, I had a better one." A hint of his usual smile touched his lips. "So I gather, Sheriff Parker said you burst into the Silver Dollar and rallied the entire saloon to my rescue." "I was desperate," she admitted. "I couldn't bear the thought of you dying because of me." His expression softened. "Not because of you, Sophia. For something I believe in. There's a difference. And what do you believe in that's worth dying for?" His gaze held her steadily. "Justice. Doing what's right, no matter the cost." His fingers tightened around hers again. "And protecting those who deserve protection." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a recognition of feelings neither was quite ready to name, but both acknowledged existed. Before either could speak further, Dr. Simmons returned. "That's enough for now," she said firmly. "My patient needs rest, and Judge Hollister wants to take your formal statement, Miss Dawson." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sophia gave her testimony to Judge Hollister, who immediately issued warrants for the arrest of Judge Carlton, Sheriff Biggs, and several of their associates. A contingent of federal marshals was dispatched to Redemption to execute the warrants and investigate further. Zachary recovered rapidly under Dr. Simmons's care, soon well enough to sit up and receive visitors. Sheriff Parker reported that 2 of the ambushers had been killed in the confrontation, 3 captured, and 1 escaped, including Tucker, who was now also wanted for attempted murder of a federal marshal. "What about my journey to California?" Sophia asked Judge Hollister one evening as they sat on his veranda. "I'm grateful for your hospitality, but I can't impose indefinitely." The judge studied her thoughtfully. "Miss Dawson, have you considered remaining in Arizona Territory? Prescott is growing rapidly. We have need of educated people, especially women who might teach or work in other professional capacities." "That's not what I had planned," Sophia replied, though the idea no longer seemed as foreign as it once had. "Plans change," the judge observed mildly. "Sometimes for the better." He sipped his tea before adding, "I understand Marshal Zimmerman has been offered a permanent position here in Prescott. The town council wants him as our new federal liaison." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "Has he accepted?" "Not yet. I believe he's considering his options." The judge's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Perhaps you might discuss it with him? He's well enough for visitors now, and I suspect your opinion would carry considerable weight." The following morning, Sophia visited Zachary at Dr. Simmons's house. Finding him dressed and sitting in a chair by the window, color returned to his face and strength evident in his movements despite the sling supporting his injured arm. "You look better," she said, taking the seat he offered. "Feel better," he confirmed. "Doc says I can leave tomorrow, though no riding or strenuous activity for another week at least." "Judge Hollister mentioned you've been offered a position here in Prescott." Zachary nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Town's growing. They need someone to coordinate between local law enforcement and federal authorities." He hesitated, then asked, "What about you? Still planning to continue to California?" Sophia took a deep breath. "I've been reconsidering. Judge Hollister suggested there might be opportunities here for someone with my background." Hope flickered in Zachary's eyes. "There would be. Prescott needs teachers, administrators. It's a civilized town, growing more so every day. And safer than Redemption, I imagine," she added with a small smile. "Much." He leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "Sophia, I've been thinking a great deal while recovering, about what matters to me. What I want for my future." Her heart beat faster. "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That some things are worth changing plans for." His good hand reached for hers. "I know we haven't known each other long, but these past days, thinking I might never see you again." He faltered, then continued with renewed determination. "I care for you, Sophia, more than I thought possible in such a short time." Joy bloomed in her chest, unexpected but undeniable. "I care for you too, Zachary. When I thought you might die in that ambush, I realized how much." His fingers tightened around hers. "I'm not asking for promises. Just time. Time to see if what's growing between us could become something lasting." "I'd like that," she replied softly. "Very much." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I'll accept the position here. And perhaps you might consider teaching at the new school they're establishing?" "Perhaps I might," she agreed, returning his smile. "It seems the territory has more to offer than I realized." In the weeks that followed, Sophia and Zachary's relationship deepened as they both settled into life in Prescott. Sophia accepted a position teaching at the newly established school, her Boston education making her highly qualified by frontier standards. Zachary took up his role as federal liaison, working closely with Sheriff Parker to ensure law and order prevailed in the growing town. News arrived from Redemption that Judge Carlton, Sheriff Biggs, and several of their associates had been arrested. The federal investigation uncovered evidence of dozens of cases similar to Sophia's travelers, particularly women, falsely accused and sentenced to indenture that amounted to slavery. The scandal rocked the territory, leading to reforms in judicial oversight and law enforcement practices. As summer turned to autumn, Zachary's homestead was sold, the proceeds used to purchase a modest house on a quiet street in Prescott. Elijah came to town for the housewarming, bringing with him Zachary's personal possessions and a knowing smile for Sophia. Told him he'd been alone too long, the old ranch hand confided. Never thought it would take a jailbreak and a shootout to change his mind. But that's Zach for you, never does anything the easy way. On a crisp October evening, with the mountains turning gold and crimson with changing leaves, Zachary took Sophia for a walk along Granite Creek. As the setting sun painted the sky in spectacular hues, he dropped to one knee, presenting her with a simple gold ring. "I know it's fast," he said, uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. "But I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Sophia Dawson. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, with all my heart, yes." They were married in November, with Judge Hollister officiating and the entire town seemingly in attendance. Samuel and Rebecca Running Deer made the journey for the ceremony, bringing wedding gifts from both settler and native communities. Elijah stood as Zachary's best man, his weathered face beaming with pride. In the spring of 1879, Sophia received a letter from her cousin Charlotte in California, expressing delight at Sophia's happiness and promising to visit when travel was safer. By then, Sophia was settled contentedly into her role as both teacher and Marshal's wife, her previous life in Boston seeming increasingly distant, like a story read long ago. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching twilight settle over Prescott, Zachary took her hand, his expression contemplative. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Not continuing to California? Staying in this rough territory instead of returning to civilization?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "I thought I would," she admitted. "When I first arrived in Arizona, all I wanted was to escape. But now," she gazed out at the town, at the mountains beyond, at the vast open sky that had once terrified her and now felt like freedom. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Even with the dangers, the hardships." She turned to him, her heart full of the love that had grown between them, a love forged in danger and adversity, but strengthened by shared purpose and deepening understanding. "Especially with those," she said softly. "They brought me to you, after all." His smile was tender as he drew her close. "From an auction block in Redemption to a schoolhouse in Prescott. Not the journey you planned." "No," she agreed, resting her head against his shoulder. "A far better one." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sophia reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here, the tragedy of her father's death, the betrayal and theft that had sent her west, the horrible injustice in Redemption that had seemed like the end of all hope. Yet from those desperate circumstances had come this new life, this love, this home in a place she'd never imagined belonging. "I was thinking," Zachary said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about building an addition to the house. We might need more room someday." Sophia smiled, placing his hand over her stomach where, though it was too soon to be certain, she suspected new life was growing. "Someday might come sooner than you think." His eyes widened, then filled with such joy that Sophia's heart seemed too full to contain her happiness. This was not the life she had planned. It was infinitely better, richer, more meaningful than anything she could have imagined on that terrible day when men had tried to auction her away forever, and a courageous marshal had ridden up to say she stayed with him. In the years that followed, as their family grew and Prescott prospered, Sophia often thought of that moment, how close she had come to a life of servitude, and how one man's courage had changed everything. Their children grew up hearing the story, embellished as all such tales are with time, but its essence remained true. Sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, and love can be found in the most unlikely circumstances. By 1895, Zachary had risen to become chief federal marshal for the territory, respected and admired throughout Arizona. Sophia's small school had grown into Prescott's premier educational institution, where their children, 2 sons and a daughter, received the foundation of their education before continuing their studies in the East. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they hosted a celebration attended by most of the town, Samuel Running Deer, now elderly but still dignified, raised a toast. "To Zachary and Sophia," he said, his voice carrying across the gathering, "who prove that even in this wild territory, justice and love can triumph. May their story be told for generations to come." And it was.